The night was calm, but Melissa Carter's heart wasn't. She sat quietly in the back of a city bus, her reflection flickering across the window as streetlights drifted by. Her hair was tied back in a hurry, her fingers raw from scrubbing dishes all day. The faint scent of lemon detergent still clung to her uniform. In just 10 minutes, she would meet him, the man she'd been talking to online for 3 whole months. But what could she possibly say when she looked like this? What could a man like Daniel, a financial analyst with a downtown apartment, see in a woman who spent her nights cleaning offices and saving every penny to keep her younger brother in school? If you still believe that kindness, second chances, and true love exist, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to PureKindnessHub, because your small act of kindness helps stories like this reach hearts that need a little hope. When the bus hissed to a stop, Melissa stepped out into the chilly night. Her sneakers squeaked against the wet pavement. The logo on her uniform, bright space janitorial, was stitched right over her heart. A quiet reminder of the life she was trying to rise above. She thought about ducking into a cafe to change into the floral dress in her tote bag, but there was no time. The bus had been late, and Daniel was already waiting at the small Italian restaurant downtown. Her heart pounded louder than her footsteps as she hurried toward him. Twice that day, she almost counseled. Once, after her supervisor scolded her for missing a spot under a desk. Again, after bleach splashed her wrist, leaving a small burn. But something deep inside, a quiet spark of hope, told her not to give up. Maybe she just wanted, for one night, to feel seen. The restaurant glowed softly from within, laughter and music spilling into the street. Through the window, she saw Daniel, clean-cut, confident, scrolling through his phone. He looked just like his photos, maybe even better. The kind of man who never worried about bus schedules or detergent-stained hands. Melissa hesitated. She almost turned. Daniel looked up and saw her. Their eyes met. He smiled, and then he stood. She froze, wanting to hide her rough hands behind her back, to apologize for how tired she looked. But before she could, Daniel opened the door and said warmly, "You came." The first few moments were awkward. Melissa apologized for being late, for her uniform, for everything. But Daniel just smiled and said, "I'm glad you're here." There was no judgment in his voice, only sincerity. And that simple kindness began to melt her walls. As dinner went on, she started to relax. She told him about her job, her 17-year-old brother Mason, and how she'd been working since she was 15 after their parents died in a car accident. She laughed softly as she said, "My life may smell like bleach, but it's honest." Daniel listened carefully, his expression gentle. Then he said something that made her stop. He told her he'd grown up poor, too. His father was a mechanic, his mother, a waitress. "I still remember the smell of engine oil on my dad's jacket," he said. "So, detergent and dreams, that's nothing to hide." Something in Melissa's chest tightened. For years, she had hidden her struggle. Now, someone was telling her it was nothing to be ashamed of. From that night on, they saw each other often. Sometimes after her shift, sometimes on his lunch breaks. Daniel would bring her coffee, or gloves when the weather got cold. Once, he even stopped by her workplace pretending to need the restroom just to see her smile. Her coworkers teased her, calling him the Wall Street boyfriend. Melissa didn't mind. For the first time, her world felt lighter. Still, part of her worried. Daniel's world was so different from hers. His friends drove Teslas while she counted coins for rent. She never told him she sometimes skipped meals to save for Mason's school books. Love, she thought, wasn't for people like her. Then one night, everything changed. Mason called crying he'd been accepted into college, but the admission fee was due in days. Melissa worked non-stop that weekend, sleeping barely 3 hours. But by Monday, she still didn't have enough. When she met Daniel that evening, her face was pale, her hands trembling. She tried to hide it, but he noticed. When she finally told him, tears filled her eyes. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "You've carried the world for too long," he said softly. "Let someone help you for once." She shook her head. "I don't want pity." He smiled gently. "Then let me be someone who believes in you." The next day, Mason told her that an anonymous donor had paid the rest of the college fee. Melissa knew instantly who it was. She cried in the janitor's supply closet, tears, not of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. When she saw Daniel again, she asked why he'd done it. He looked at her with quiet warmth and said, "Because people like you make the world beautiful. You spend your life cleaning up everyone else's mess. Someone should help clean yours." That broke her. She wept openly, finally letting go of the weight she'd carried for years. Months passed. Mason started college. Melissa was promoted to manage a small cleaning team near Daniel's office. Life was still hard, but she smiled more now. The scent of detergent never left her hands. But Daniel would often say, "That's the smell of courage." Their love wasn't built on grand gestures or luxury dinners. It grew through shared sandwiches, tired smiles, and two hearts that refused to give up on hope. Sometimes after her shift, she'd find Daniel waiting in the parking lot with 2 cups of tea. They'd sit in his car, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Those were her favorite nights. Then, one evening, Daniel invited her to dinner at the same Italian restaurant where they'd first met. Melissa arrived wearing a simple blue dress and her favorite perfume. Daniel had reserved the same corner table. A single candle flickered between them. She smiled and said teasingly, "At least I don't smell like detergent tonight." Daniel chuckled softly. "Good," he said, "because tonight, I want you to smell like the rest of your life." Before she could respond, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. "Melissa Carter," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I fell in love with your hands before I ever held them, the hands that worked, cared, and never stopped dreaming. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded. Applause rose softly from nearby tables. Daniel slipped the ring onto her trembling hand, and for the first time, Melissa realized every long night, every heartbreak, every scar had led her right here to love that finally saw her dot as they walked out hand in hand beneath the city lights. Melissa looked up at the same sky she'd always known, but tonight, every light seemed to shine just a little brighter. And though her hands still smelled faintly of detergent, she finally understood, sometimes dreams don't come after the struggle. Sometimes, they're born right in the middle of it. Pure Kindness Hub, where stories remind us that love, hope, and kindness still have a place in this world. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your small gesture could inspire someone who needs hope tonight.